Eastern time. It's the Hour of Empower, LinkedIn Live, and actually more live stream because we are streaming on YouTube and other channels. So that's a misnomer. It's really live streaming. With that said, chat is open. Feel free. Omar's already here first to get the door prize that we haven't figured out what is yet, and. Until an avalanche of more comments come in, I'll turn it over to Elizabeth. Elizabeth has been here many times and just was happy to pair her channels, which is a great accomplishment if you haven't done it. But it's also fun if you get a chance, Elizabeth, while we're talking, you can go to your profile and it should show up in your background. Is that the case, Kelly?
Yes. It should show on your banner that it's live.
Yeah, and then people could actually join, and it'll automatically post when it's done. So it's a lot of good stuff without doing very much. With that said, Elizabeth, welcome to the show again. Maybe catch everybody up on what's been happening in your life, and primarily LinkedIn and whatever else you can share, and your first thoughts on Relate.
Well, thank you so much for having me again. And hi, William. Hi, Omar. It's interesting when I when I saw the word that was what we were going to be talking about. Immediately, what popped up into my head was the conversation that I had with Kelle recently, because I sort of shared a bit of what was going on in my life. And right after that, Kelle said, I can totally relate to what you're going through and what you're saying, Elizabeth. So right there at that time, even though we don't think about the word relate, but the feeling alone by itself just allowed me to want to even share more and open up as soon as she said that. So I find that the word relate has some really feeling good words attached to it, right? And that's feelings of trust or comfort. It's welcoming, right? It's used in it can be used in a very powerful way. I mean, positive way, that is. And also there are other feelings too, where it can also mean a no, which there are boundaries. And that's something I would like to maybe share later on in the show. But for now, the word relate, this moment, it's a feel-good word, definitely. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And, I think relate lends itself to relationship and relations. So, Kelle, how could you lift off of that?
I mean, it's so beautiful, and it's so true on Relate. And I think that's why, so much of what I've been doing with having other people share their stories is because we can all relate to one another on some level, even if you've never been through the exact same thing as somebody else. And even if you have been through the exact same thing, you likely didn't evolve, change, transform in the same manner because we're all very different of who we are. But really, when we can relate to a story, it actually helps us heal. Hearing someone else and being like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone, like that. And I agree with you. It's like a hug almost when somebody says, I can relate to you. The walls come down and like, this is a safe place to land. I can share who I am because this person is accepting me. That. And I think it's, a beautiful thing. And associating it to, of course, relationship, Dawn, I think is so important. And that's what we're all doing here in this community or on this platform. And I think that I'll leave it at that little vibe for this go round. I definitely have some other thoughts, but that's where I'll start it for now, Dawn. So over to you.
That's perfect. And, when I look at Relate, it really is when something finally develops, comes together, intersects, because everybody starts really as strangers before they meet and then even get to know each other. And at a certain point, how fast do you relate to somebody? Sometimes it's instantaneous, right? You can just see something in somebody or feel something from somebody and know there's some kindred spirit, which means there's an opportunity, right? There, it's like the door's open and now one can learn more about each other. And I think through opportunities like this, where people get to see and feel people before they even have to be known to those people, right? Because the people in the audience don't have to be commenting, they don't have to be interacting, but they can be watching and feeling. And then every day they get to know somebody and say, hey, this is the real person. It wasn't just the yesterday person or today's person. And then one more benefit is you see how other people treat other people. And how that happens is how you're going to be treated. You know, I always say how people talk about someone else is how they're talking about you when you're not there. And do you want to trust someone who's not been trustworthy to everybody they've just talked about? Or is there people that you say, hey, they go out of their way, and maybe not even go out of their way, but naturally relate to other people? You really don't need a deep connection. I never forget when Mario said when he went into the grocery store and found some guy on the floor who was crabby and complaining to everybody, and he actually went up to the guy and gave him a hug, you know, and says, you know, things will get better, or gave him some words of encouragement, and left and went grocery shopping. On the way back, the guy hugged him and said, that's really what I needed today. So, you know, some relationships last a lifetime, some last an encounter. But that encounter allowed you to redirect your thoughts, pivot your activities. And I think that's the important thing about relating, is having that connection. And one reason I came up with that word, because originally I thought it was going to be Kelly and Harvey, or Kelly. And this is even better with Elizabeth. But I saw how me and Kelly and so many other people on the show related so easily. And it makes it even better when you have a common interest and direction, right? If everybody's here to get bigger, better, smarter, faster, you know, how can we glean from each other? And that was one of the reasons I'm still considering this monthly collaboration group, where we can move from here to actually get around the table in a Zoom call and say, what's everybody working on? What, and more importantly, what do we want to do together? Because we already have a foundation. So how do we co-produce more shows? How do we co-promote more shows? How do we build best practices? Because motivation and encouragement will get you to the starting line, but you got to be able to run when the gun goes off. Just being ready, just being excited. You know, playing is where you start to learn how to play. And if you do well, and more importantly, if you have support, right? You get more gas if you're attached to more tanks, you know, and then you can lean on people. So anyways, don't want to get too deep into that. Omar's here. Here's William. Gay is here. Nice to see you. We just connected this morning. I just saw you had about 20,000 connections, and numbers by themselves don't mean anything. But someone had to work to put those numbers together.
Yeah.
Whether they're relevant or not, somebody had to push connect or accept or whatever. Here we've got, Debbie's here. We got Debbie. Can't forget our wonderful monarch butterfly lady. Relate equals empathy and trust and transparency. And, you know, when you talk about somebody like Debbie, she was an instant relate, you know, because of her enthusiasm and excitement and joy. And, you know, those are the lessons you want to pick up from somebody. In most cases, you got too many facts and figures and technical stuff. But if someone could make you feel better, you know, that's going to make you do better. You know, I think that's so important. Mohammed is here. Let me see. I hope this message, I wanted to reach out, let you know. I understand everybody's looking for work. But you know, I think the key is really giving yourself more credit and feeling you are more relatable than you give yourself credit for.
Yeah.
You know, that you are more interesting and more thought-provoking by just your ability to encourage somebody else to be so. Right? Like I say with content, so many people never wrote and aren't very good at it. All of a sudden they got to make a post and they think they have to be like Shakespeare.
Yeah.
It has to be like something really special. And if they said, "Hey, I woke up today and I saw something, and this is what it meant to me," would be more valuable
Yes.
than someone dissecting it in 10 different ways, discussing it in 3 levels, because no one's there yet. Anyways, getting back to Elizabeth, we've got some fascinating audience here. And what can you say to that?
Oh my goodness, you said a lot. That was really deep stuff. I don't know how to pick up from that, but I feel that, just the word relate again, what comes to mind is, I like what Kelle said about through storytelling, right? Just to share stories so that others can actually relate, and also collaboration too. It does bring people together, like like you mentioned, Donald. And it's also a felt word, right? It's a fine felt word, something along those lines of right. And but there's a twist to this, I find, when it comes to the word relate. And for example, I'll share a quick story with you. There was a time when I was, toxic relationships, toxic people come together, and there was lots of projecting. And as I continued throughout my journey and I started to grow, when that person would actually project, before it was always wanting to create an argument and start to project back, right? So as I started to grow and the projection continued from the other person, I actually started practicing saying, I am not relating to what it is that you're saying. And even though there was no word of apology, because it did not merit an apology, why am I apologizing? No, I'm just letting you know that I'm not relating to what you're saying. And it immediately would just shut the person down, because there's just no connection with the words and the action and the energy. So relate in that sense actually meant a no, and also boundaries. What are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, I mean, I
Right,
agree
Kelly?
with that. Like, I can relate to that. Real, because it is when you shut down the energy and not giving it back, and because you can't have conflict unless you participate. And that's usually, I think, in your situation, which is very similar sounding to a toxic relationship I was in. And because the projection, of course, it's all about what's internal of someone. And when they project it onto you, you do go like, well, wait a minute, I'm not any of those things that you just said, or I'm not that. And I can't reconcile that because it makes no sense. But when you sit and take it, because I did for a long time, you are engaging just by giving any kind of energy back, whether I was crying or whatever it was, you're engaging in it. So you're giving it more energy. But when you do finally be like, yeah, I can't relate to this, or this isn't about me and I'm not going to participate in this, they don't know how to respond other than, well, mine would just get louder. That's what they do, because now it's frustrating. Like, I need to have that from you. And it is, the opposite of, what we're saying. Like, I can't relate to you. Like, I can't relate to what you're saying to me. And I'm not going to let it sit with me. Like, that's also an internal choice. And I think powerful in that example, Elizabeth, probably more than maybe some can relate to, is you took your power back in saying that. Like, I cannot relate to what you're saying. And sitting in your truth. And like, I got goosebumps saying that. It is a beautiful thing to take back your power and sit in your truth. And wow, I didn't expect that to go to this round. So Dawn, where do you want to go with that now?
I think it's amazing how fast, again, we got there, because that is relatable to so many people. Everybody tends to play or do more superficial things, that project more attractively, or are trying to influence people by their style instead of their substance. But your ultimate substance is your heart,
Yes.
right? And if you share your heart, you don't get your mind starting to filter it or cover it up or whatever. And the other thing that was kind of funny, and knowing that we're going to do relate or relationships today, I look back, and everybody can definitely see how that works with family, right? I mean, we're talking about meeting new people, connecting, relating, but family is there.
Mm-hmm.
And my family, I think we're like most families, is you always had different people in it, right? You had the smart one, you had the buffoon, you had, you invited them, you say you knew exactly who was going to show up.
Yeah.
And you also had, looking back, so many minor issues that became major challenges for people within the family, right? Someone said something, someone forgot to do something. Some people even don't even know where it started, right? And I said to myself, how did you never get in one of those situations? Because I always kind of knew what I was walking into and who I was dealing with. And most people would think, well, everything is equal, but it isn't. People come in differently into different situations. And what I figured out is I just related to different people differently.
Mm-hmm.
The ones who were really supportive and happy, I was as close as I could get to them.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that I knew were just picking a fight, I would just resign or not engage.
Mm-hmm.
Just say, hey, I'm here only for a few hours. I'm looking to have a good time. That's too heavy right now, or something like that. Or talk to your cousin over there. That you can relate to him.
I love that.
A traffic cop telling people where the best place for them to be with who is not you in it. And I think that applies to life. Is you have to be forgiving to people who are in different situations, no better, no worse than you. But who wants to be the authority? Who wants to be the smart person? What does
Some
it
people.
the other person? That's the thing. They're doing it because it makes them feel stronger, more powerful, more whatever. But if you have to use other people to feel something yourself, you've already admitted a deficiency, right? I got to minimize somebody to maintain my whatever. And meanwhile, you had to make someone a loser just to keep yourself playing, not winning. Because obviously, if that was enough, you wouldn't need more every time you need it. So I think,
Irony in that, though, too, is like the person that does that doesn't see themselves that way. Like they don't see themselves as putting the other person down in order to put themselves up. Like they think they're actually justified in their behavior to someone else. Like I just think it's interesting because there are always those people that are the smartest ones in the room. They know better than you, and by putting you down makes them feel better. But if you were to ask them, you do realize that you're putting other people down just as a way to fulfill your own insecurity, right? Quickly be like, I'm not insecure. Like, I mean, I don't think they usually see it introspectively, the ones that act that way or project that. So that was just my interjection.
yes, go ahead, Elizabeth.
No, I actually wanted to bring up what you said, John, about the when we're in that group, right, with other family members or even co-workers, for example, right, and we want to be able to collaborate and get along, etc. And so when a co-worker might say something that you're just not incompatible with, if we want to keep the relationship in a positive way, right? So I would actually hear myself saying, I really do apologize, and I really want to try and understand you, but I'm not connecting, I'm not relating to what you're saying. Would you mind? Would it be so terrible just to make yourself more clear so I can understand, as opposed to blowing off or just dismissing completely, right? Yeah.
Well, I think with that, and maybe to address Kelly's point, the people who act like that typically aren't part of groups like this. They're not getting a lot of feedback. They're not sharing their situation to get feedback. They're kind of locked in, and this is how I do things, and this is how the world is, and this is, and it's already concrete.
Yeah.
So they're kind of more lost than they think, or totally lost.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's not working, instead of putting it in neutral or getting into reverse, they move more aggressively.
Yeah.
Right? So they got to squeeze the tube even more towards the end to get the same as they were getting at the beginning. And meanwhile, as they're getting more, someone is giving up more in order to continue to build, to compensate for that deficiency. And you can't have a trusting relationship when it's based on taking, just to, instead of giving, or giving the other way. Instead, if it's not working, maybe the opposite works better. And people are like, wow, that's so far from what I used to do. Well, that's how far away you are from where you need to be. That's what the compass is telling you. You're going to fight gravity and fight nature and then still live a fulfilled life, because at the end of the day, where's the happiness? Where's the joy? Why are you even with somebody if there's no happiness or joy or hope of that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's actually two people morphed into less than one person, since that other person isn't even complete. So, in so many ways, it is a numbers opportunity to really identify yourself with, who am I really down deep, and who do I need to continue to help me help them, right? Who is out there that I can help by their helping me allow that help to happen.
Yeah, I love that, because that is right. We get more back when we give. I mean, when we to someone who's willing to receive and also give back. I mean, it's got to be a revolving. It's got to be a shared thing. And I think, sort of to piggyback what on both of you said, but what Elizabeth was saying about work, or being in the office, because this obviously does apply at the office. And the quote I used this morning, and I'm probably not going to say it exactly accurate, but you'll get the feeling. It's by John Maxwell, and it's, be close enough to your team so you can relate, but far enough away so you can motivate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that is so interesting. And what it sparked in me, and the reason that I used it. And I used to, when I would come on it, when we first started using words, like the night before, I'd be like, man, what am I going to say about that word tomorrow? Now I just, in the morning, it's kind of whatever comes to me and what I'm feeling drawn to in the moment, so that it is just more organic and a lot less stress, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Is how I thought about that is in organizations. And this is a big problem. And I've seen this, experienced it, and I'm sure most of you have too. You can have leadership that, they're up here in their little upper echelon bubble making decisions, but when they are not in touch and really can relate to what's happening with the masses in the organization, they're making decisions based on, a fraction of the information. And it's impacting the masses, but they're making it where they sit and not where others sit. And anyways, it just drew me into that, because leadership is about being connected with who you're working with, and being relatable, collaborating with them, having conversation, and being empathetic and sympathetic from a management leadership position. And that's what I always loved about managing a team or working with a team, and still do, is having that, relatability to one another. And as a leader of a team, to be able to say, like, I knew when a team member walked in and something was off, like, something's going wrong with Andrew today. And I would just send a message, hey, when you have a few minutes, come into my office. And it would just be, you don't need to tell me what's going on, but it would be like, hey man, I just wanted to do a little check-in. Are you doing all right? Is there something I can do to help you?
Mm-hmm.
It's that relatability. And when people feel seen and heard, the response is much different. And I would be okay to be like, wow, you're having a rough time with something in your family. We'll help you out today. Like, and that's what a team does. And I think that's about relating to the individuals that you're leadership. I was just trying to use a simple example where I think we could all relate to. So those are my thoughts this time.
Ooh,
I think they're beautiful thoughts, and you know,
Ooh.
the more I see interaction between people, the thing that most people value and appreciate the most is honesty.
Yes.
And even when you're working somewhere, everybody knows what's going on, probably more than you do, because they're part of what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, you might have just got a report or a direction or something to say, go in there and talk to these people or do something with them. And, you know, at the same time, there's a fine line between carrying the company message and being true to the people who are true to you,
Mhm.
right? So the key is to bring foundation to it, because everybody's, oh, the plant's closing next week. Well, okay, well, that's awful. Unless there's, but we're relocating all the people here and you're getting a pay raise. Well, that's great. So there's always that reason why that needs to be explained. You know, some people just throw it out. Hey, here's the new announcement. Read it, do it, goodbye. Instead of saying, well, here's the thought behind this. The old way people are getting hurt, or we're making mistakes, or whatever it is, that people can say, you know, change is constant.
Yeah.
So new things are always going to be brought to the table.
We want people to get involved. We want to enroll people, not to just build up barriers and just to, think that they're going to get it, right? So you know that like you just said, we throw things out there and we just assume without actually getting involved when it comes to our team and getting the proper feedback and see if they do relate to what it is that I'm bringing to them or bringing to the table. It's all about collaboration and wanting everyone to succeed within themselves, right? So they can feel good and they can enjoy coming back to work. Absolutely. It's not just taking feelings for granted when it comes to leadership, right?
Well,
So
I think to that point, leadership is
not
not.
the subject, but
I mean, but everything relates to everything, and that's the good
Yeah,
thing
for
about
sure.
it. I learned a lesson early on with leadership is you need to be respected, not liked. And you know, not everybody's going to like you, and you're not going to like everybody, and that's the way it is. It might change in different directions, but hey, we got a job to do. We're part of a team. You know, I need you just as much or more than you need me.
Mhm.
Well, sometimes you have to get rid of someone, and you can't tell everybody the reason, right? Because of confidentiality and everything else. And that's where trust has to come in, where people say, I don't understand this. I don't even appreciate it, but I know if that's the person doing it, they know something I don't know, or there's a good intention somewhere there. Uh, and that's the extra you need to give people is, so far what I'm hearing, I don't, and that's when you sit down and talk about it.
Mhm.
Yes.
When you knock on somebody's door and you come in again with respect and not accusation, say, hey, if you got a minute, I'm a little confused. You know, that's all. I'm a little bit, you know, don't quite understand it. And, you know, I'd love to hear, you know, what it is. And that's when people get their voice. And that was one of the benefits of live streaming. People get to be seen in the moment. That's what I like about spontaneity is whenever you practice, whenever you anticipate, you allow the moment to disappear, and you've now created the moment that you might have thought of a day or two ago and bring it in here. But you know, it's almost like if everybody's doing it one way, you got to do it that way.
Mhm.
You know, in order to be part of the group, in order to relate to the group, and usually the person who is the kinder, more giving person never gets too affected by things. You know, the person who normally someone would have got upset and they said, "Hey, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal," and they're sincere about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And those are the people you gravitate to. And I think when you're relating to people, it's at the end of the day, who makes you feel better for the time you just spent with that person,
Yeah.
right? And if you're more elevated, more knowledgeable, more happy, well, then you want to find more ways to work with that person, because too many people figure I'm going to do something and then I'm going to get something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And they can fill in the middle, like, who am I going to do this with? And how much fun and joy am I going to have along the way? Because that pays for fuel to keep it going.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where people have to figure their priorities. What am I doing it purely for money? Because at that point, I could debase myself.
Mm.
I just put a sign up saying, hey, money for time, money for what I can do for you, versus here's what I need in a relationship in order to engage in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? No different. Just met somebody on the street and they say, well, I can do all this stuff. And you could say, well, I don't care about that stuff. About me. I care about my stuff, And so, anyways, Elizabeth, you only had a short period there to say something, so I'll let you catch up. And actually, Jeffrey Lackey is here. I'll just take this moment to pivot. Remember, the Go Giver give way more value than what people pay for.
Yes.
For customers, employees, and investors.
Yes.
You start with this whole bunch of what you can give before you have any business, right? You've got an inventory that hopefully people will engage, and then you'll distribute it and you'll be full up.
Yeah.
Well, before that happens, why not give it all away to anybody who can take it now? And then, which is really creating over-serving of value, right? If I've got this time with nothing to do with it, why not apply it to even one person as much as they can have of it, right? To see how much good I can do, how fast, and then the next person comes in, you're better providing that. But most people measure things too closely. Well, if I'm going to give up an hour and a half and it's like $200 an hour, that's going to be this and that. People see that, people sense that, and they don't want to be a price ticket. They don't want to be that part of it because they're looking at what fulfills them. What makes a better person for your time. But anyways, Jeffrey made a good point this morning. He was anxious to see Elizabeth. And I guess Elizabeth and Jeffrey are in different groups. And I know Jeffrey does a prayer meeting every day at 12 p.m. And people join that. So anyways, Jeffrey's question was, I want to see Elizabeth today. How do I is there a link or something to the show? And what I shared is anybody doing a live stream, you can go to their profile and their background will be showing that live stream, and then it just says engage, and then you get in. So I think that is a good point for people to see. Jeffrey says, great point, Elizabeth, and comes back with good point on trust begets communication. Communication begets trust. You can't build trust without effective two-way communication.
Mm-hmm.
So right. So
yeah.
Kelle,
yeah, well, I think there was a lot there that you just said, Don. And to go with what Jeffrey's saying here is what stood out is when you were talking about letting people go as an example, and you can't. I always had the philosophy. I mean, I remember the first person I ever terminated, and I probably cried more than she did because it was so difficult. But when I learned things and how Arizona is an at-will state. I don't even have to have a reason. I could just fire you because I want to. That's not how I roll. Thankfully, the organizations that I worked with, I did work for one in Texas that they did do that. They didn't care. They just fired you. But we went through a process. Like if we were having the meeting of your termination, it was no surprise. Like we're in this meeting because of you. Like we're not here because I don't like you or there's anything else. We've had so many communications, write-ups, whatever it was, to go through the entire process that we're not surprised that we're sitting here. And I always, after that would occur, I would always sit down with my team, and they generally weren't surprised either because they knew. You can always tell when your coworker is slacking or not doing what they're supposed to do or not meeting people know what's happening. It's just like parents who don't think their kids know that they were fighting. Like we know. It's the same in an organization. The team knows what's happening. But I would have open communication, like, does anybody have any questions or concerns? Because generally when someone is let go, people get scared, like, oh gosh, am I going to get fired next? But this is where I think communication, again, is so key. My team members, they always knew where they stood because I met with them regularly, would give them, props all the time for, when they did something good, pat on the back. It wasn't just quarterly when we were doing reviews or during annual review period, and they would get their review and be like, holy crap, I didn't realize that I was not doing as well as you thought or as well as I thought I was. Because that's an ongoing conversation. And I can't relate to leaders that actually enjoyed, and I've seen some of these that enjoyed when annual reviews would come up and they would like blast the person and surprise them from.
What do you think is going on within that person, Kelly, when they just enjoy? What's really going on with that person? What are your thoughts on that? Is it just an insecurity or?
Yes, I think it's deep-seated, hurt people hurt people. That's been a phrase I've been hearing a lot lately and saying a lot. But is a person that's on the receiving end, if you're not aware that it's not about you, it's about that person.
Mm-hmm.
But people take it personally. I've been there. I mean, I've taken it personally when someone's projected their crap on me. But I know now that that's not the case. It does have to do. There's a complete insecurity, and from a business standpoint, I would question that leader of, are they really knowledgeable in their position? Because that's also a behavior that comes out in leadership when people act in that way. They're usually not really great at their job themselves, and they project it onto subordinates because they can. So I do think it has a lot to be a source of insecurity and wanting power. And going back to what you were saying, Don, about the family member who's projecting down on someone to make themselves feel better. I think that's sort of the same thing. And again, I can't relate to that kind of behavior.
And it's interesting, not to interrupt, John, but I remember when I actually had my own team when I worked for Estee Lauder way back in the days. I'm in my 20s and I had this entire district that I was responsible for. And, I was always known to be this happy-go-lucky, very free-spirited person, always wanting everyone to be in a really good mood, right? And so then when there were situations at the counter, and we know what it's like when we bring women together, right, in a very small space, things do happen. Yeah. I didn't know how to handle that. And I was actually responsible for approaching these women, these lovely ladies, about their own personal situations going on, that they were bringing into the business at the counter. And I did not like those moments. Like you said, that, when you had to let people go or address situations, because I was actually I brought my own set of emotions into it, not wanting to make them feel bad or sad and break up a team. So I struggled with approaching them about that, their own stuff. And honestly, with my own insecurities, I actually ended up resigning because I wanted everyone to be happy and good, even though the business wasn't, it would affect the business. But I was lost. I was so lost with myself because I just wanted to be happy. So, I was lacking that particular leadership skill within myself, being in my early 20s, right? And I stepped away and I resigned into another position, in the makeup artist position, where it was easy and it was more fun because my strength was really engaging and connecting with people naturally and organically, bringing them back to the counter and closing a sale. That was my strength. But I had to eventually learn that about myself when my life crumbled and my world flipped. And that was one thing I learned, how to approach people and how to handle and how to be uncomfortable or be comfortable with the uncomfortable situations. Absolutely. And it just takes conversation. It takes a conversation out of humility and trust and relating to others, relate to yourself, be true to yourself, right? So you can actually approach people with truth. And honesty. Yeah. So
that's beautiful because it's all perspective.
Yeah.
Fortunately or unfortunately, I had to terminate hundreds of people, especially when I got into restructurings and turnarounds. And sometimes you have to get rid of 12 people in a meeting at a time.
Yeah.
And you could hear what goes on with it. But I will say that I learned so much over time because it's all what led up to that meeting. And, I was fortunate. My daughter was my HR director for the last 8 years of my business. And actually, my wife was the co-founder for 8 years when we started. So I started with my wife and ended with my daughter. But she was so meticulous about knowing all the rules. We had a co-employer with us, so we had to get authorization to terminate somebody because they would take the liability if we did everything right. And you had to dot your I's and cross your T's, and they'd say, okay. And what I learned is by the time they came in there, they already had 2 warnings about it. They already had 2 sit downs.
Yeah.
They were on their 3rd thing. And to me, it was like, hey, we did this, we talked, we said this, and this is how it ended up. And what I learned is it's too late to get too deep into what's already been decided, right? Because people say, well, give me one more chance, or or something like that. Early on, you try to explain, and you have to understand they're not thinking like you're thinking. You're going to be here tomorrow. They're going to have to go home tonight.
Yeah.
Their family, our income is gone.
Yeah.
And I don't know when it's going to come back. And I transitioned to not about you or the company, about the fit, right? Because it's just not a good fit for you. It's not a good fit for us. There's a place you could fit better. There's a person that could fit better with us. And they have to come back for the rest of their life and say, I just got terminated for this, right? And if it's like, well, it wasn't a good fit, or, hey, we had a bad quarter, we need to slim down, well, then it's not so personal, right? Still taken personally, but now I understand you're closing the plant. I'm not moving to Toledo. There's nothing left for me. It doesn't make it easier, but you can't make it easier. That's the thing. No matter what you say, once you say goodbye,
right,
they don't want to hear what anything else is going to happen. And you're the person that let them go.
Yeah, so, I think during that process, and I think, wow, I don't know why this sparked me so much with letting people go, is there just still has to be a caring and empathy and sympathy involved, because
absolutely
the dignity of the person. And I've always felt that way. I'm like, there is a way that you can have people leave a business, and if you're opening the door for them to leave the business, in this example, that it's still a good experience. Meaning, nobody likes to get let go, but if you treat them properly, it's not going to be, because I'm like, when you let people go just because you didn't like how they said good morning to you today, and you're just like, you're fired, go home, that person now is leaving your business, and they're talking smack about you. Like, that is the way people who are hurt and offended speak the loudest. But when you treat them with dignity and respect during the process, like I said, I did pride myself of saying, when we had that final meeting, like, you earned this meeting. I didn't want to be here. I don't want to do this. But sometimes people just need to go. And there's some people that even later, and I did have someone thank me later in their career for letting them go, because they needed that change in their life to get them to kind of wake up and go, you know what, I'm not being the best version of myself. And it was a wake-up call to be let go. And I think, letting people go, the reason it's probably hitting me is because of 2020. I mean, I remember the day after the world shut down, and the team got called in and everybody was furloughed. And the look on people's faces, and I was still trying to relate to what the heck was happening. Because I'm like, furlough was not a thing that ever came around in my career at all, ever. And I'm like, I thought furlough only applied to like the airlines. Like, I remember hearing that back in the day. But watching people's emotions in that moment of when the CEO said, as of today, as of this moment, go pack up your desk, you're going home. And it's just sort of like, wow. And even that for me, because I didn't really like the way that the CEO particularly handled it, because it felt very emotionless. It was just like, I'm doing what I need to do for me. And it felt that way. And it was like, man, you could have done that like so much more caring, because people, like you said, Don, they understand, hey, you're moving the plant or the world shut down. You don't have any income. You're not sure if you're getting PPP money. You can't afford to keep us on. There's just a way to have hard conversations, but with the words that you choose to use and how you approach people. You can give them the worst news, but if you choose your words, I think, wisely and from a place of imagine or try to relate to what this is going to do to them and their families, etc. Anyways, those are just my feelings.
And we're talking real life, real
Yes.
situations, and what I do remember is after some people were let go, their whole crew would come in and tell me stories of what they did and how they're so happy I finally took care of that issue, even though they weren't telling me what they were doing when they were seeing it until after the person left. And I'm saying, well, why didn't you mention it? Well, nobody wants to get involved. Nobody wants to say,
Very
take
true.
the person out, unless they're totally disruptive. And then you're not hurting anybody's feelings. You're really looking out for everybody, because allowing one bad apple starts to affect the whole company, the whole culture. When you get people who are two-faced and smile to you and then say something else or manipulate it. And I think when you do have a culture, because my team, I mean, there was more than 70% were there over 20 years. So when you have a stable, settled group, the person coming in is being watched by everybody who want to keep that company healthy and strong.
Yeah.
And they'll be the ones who tell them. And then I had great managers and supervisors who would counsel them, would spend time, would do as much as they could. But at a certain point, it was too much. And also, when you're in turnarounds and restructurings, you're dealing with financial issues.
Oh, yeah.
So if someone says you got to get that payroll down by this date, hey, everybody's got to get out of here. Right? I didn't feel as bad, since it wasn't me or my company that created this situation, because I didn't really know these people. But it would break my heart to come home every night after 20 or 30 terminations. Because there'd always be someone, I just had a baby 3 weeks ago. I just bought a house last week. I'm gonna lose it. And I'm like, what can I say? And usually I would just say, hey, here's what I'm working with. I was brought in to do what I have to do, and I'm doing it, right?
Yeah. And I think
go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry, it just, when you said that, it reminded me of, because I did have one time in my career where I was instructed to terminate someone. And this person was getting married the next week. And I said, I'm not doing it. Like, I refuse. If you want to terminate him, you go do it. I mean, there's a backstory. And I said, there's no harm in letting him get married, have his honeymoon, and we can do it later. Like, I refuse to do it beforehand, because you will ruin his wedding. Because, I mean, hi, honey, I just got laid off. And let's have a wedding and then go on a honeymoon with me having no job. But I absolutely refused, because it wasn't made for a reason other than the sense of this person that I actually, the previous president had hired him in my department and he was completely unqualified for the position. Well, he was related to an investor, so I had to keep him. So, like, again, I was instructed, you will train him to do something and add value to this department. So I had to put all this time and energy into getting this kid trained, because it wasn't his fault, and make it work, because I wasn't allowed to be like, he's not qualified for this position after a couple of days. he's not adding value and he can't do this job. He's unqualified. And so I had to keep him. And a year and a half went, well, I got to know this kid and liked him, and he got to be part of the team, and he did learn and added value. But then when a new president came in, he was like, this kid doesn't belong here. He lied to get in this position. You need to get rid of him. And I thought, I've invested so much time in this young man, and I will not let him go, particularly because he's getting married next week. Now, I did give him kind of a side of like, hey, you know, this kind of thing is going on in the background. You might want to start looking. Like, I gave him hints to start looking for work, and he did, thank goodness. So when he did come back from his honeymoon, of course, I had to let him go. And I did it very privately because I said, all due respect, I don't want anyone else in the room until, I'll call in HR when I'm legally required to do so. But he thanked me, like, thank you so much for respecting me enough to, one, give me a heads up to start looking, but two, to waiting till after my wedding, and that he did have his ducks in a row and he was taken care of. But the times in organizations, like you're saying, Dawn, the massive layoffs where financial, like you're restructuring and you've got to do this, and you've got to do it by this date. To be in a leadership team with those decisions, that's when you do, unfortunately, you have to remove the emotional part to make the decision. Because if you do sit and think about, oh my gosh, all those people are going to be out of work, like I wouldn't sleep for days. I mean, if I had to make a decision like that and I was making it emotionally. But I think that's the part with people within an organization is understanding an organization doesn't care. Like it's not capable of empathy and compassion. It just isn't. And to not take it personal. I know it's hard not to, but it's just decisions have to be made at a level. And again, maybe to go back what I was saying in the beginning, they're operating in a different space than the masses and aren't able to relate and have to disconnect when they have to do a big layoff like that. Or at least that's what I would think. Because I think otherwise I would probably never sleep. I would feel so bad.
Well, to add to that, because I had a lot of experience, the other element is it makes you more thoughtful when you hire a new person.
Yes.
Right? Because you don't want to have to turn that person out. So, and in most cases, people would rather take over a position and get their pay split between them. Right? So if someone's making $20 an hour and you have 4 people in the warehouse and someone says, well, don't hire another person, give me $5 of it and we'll get the job done. You'd rather pay more people. The other element too is it depends on what you give them when they leave also. If they have a nice package, if they're taken care of, if you give them medical for 6 months or a few months worth of pay, now it's like, hey, you bought a house, you got 3 months before your next payment has to be worried about. And a lot of times I'd help somebody find a job. I mean, if they were really a good person and they got turned out because we had to cut 30%, I would say, well, I know people. I'll connect you with people. And then it wasn't a LinkedIn, right? Just what Harvey does, what Christy does, what everybody and a lot of people are doing is, hey, I'll take you for a ride. I'll put you on a post this week. I'll get your name out there. So incrementally and peer-to-peer, we could do more for someone than they can do on their own because most of the cases, they're on their own. That's all they have is who they are and where they are. And if you can start getting people in circulation and getting people visibility and getting to be seen as a person, not as a position, then the dynamics change. And you know what? Most people know you for who you are. And that's what happens in any meeting with them. Is they know you're a straight shooter. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
No, I just wanted to piggyback on what Kelle was sharing about having to let someone go, because when you're put in that place to actually have that conversation with that special person whom you've actually worked with and trained, right? And you see so much potential within that person. And then of course, then there's some conspiracy going on with upper management that you have to now let this person go. Or have that discussion with that person when deep down in your heart, you know that that person is not deserving of this, right? So when that does happen, you could very well be left with, well, do I really want to work for this company? Because you start thinking, am I a good fit? Because I saw so much value in this person. What was going on? Where did this come from? You end up second guessing your own position within that company. I've been there.
Amen. And same. I mean, and that's, I'm definitely at a place in life because I've worked with in the last couple contracts that I did with pretty large organizations. I was just like, I can't work with these people that do not morally and ethically align with me. Even if what they're doing isn't impacting me directly, seeing them do it, knowing they're doing it, I don't want to be around them because it's.
And they would do the same thing to you as well.
Yes.
So,
and that was the whole thing from when Dawn at the very beginning, one of the last ones that I did a consult with, again, a big organization, the CEO wanted me on as a CMO, but also because I had leadership development coaching. And he was like, my C-suite needs communication help because there's such a breakdown. Well, within the first week, the amount of stories that he told me about the other C-suite staff were horrifying. Because I thought, you have no business telling me some of these stories, but they were presented in such a demeaning manner. And that was my immediate thought, Elizabeth. I'm like, if you're saying this about this person, when they're here, you act like they're your best friend, and this is what you're saying, this is what your problem is. You're the communication problem.
And so you even hear it in the interview too. When they start to actually complain, right? They bring on the negativity in the interview and they start to complain to a certain department, right? And you're saying, wait a second, this is not what this is supposed to be about. Why are you sharing this with me? And I just met you. I've actually experienced that as well. So, yeah.
And what do you think goes on with people who dump so much on you, like right away? I've always thought that's a fascinating thing. Like, why did you just tell me the most horrific stories about yourself when we met 5 minutes ago?
Well, a lot of times I think people disqualify themselves, and for some reason you give it more life after that. Like I say, I was in a different position because I was the owner, founder, majority shareholder. I could just dismiss anything at any time for any reason. So if anybody was disrespectful or anybody, I knew what good was. I knew what great was because I was fortunate to be around people who were good and great. And when I saw somebody who was just on their way to trying to be that, and either playing a role or trying to get tougher or stronger in front of somebody, I just decided it's just all wrong. It's all dishonest. And, that's the mistake in companies is they look at performers and not people. So there's salespeople that bring in 40% of the numbers, and they think because of they're doing so well, they're, immune to any thought. And you know what? I had to sacrifice so many. I even told them I got to do this because of you. You're the greatest salesperson, but you are the worst person for culture around here, the way you present yourself, and everybody in the organization group. And I think what we're really dealing with is that's why it's so important to take care of your business so you're not in a position of not growing, let alone minimizing, because Fridays were always the worst day in turnarounds and restructuring because that was the day everybody would get they would leave if they weren't going to be here on Monday. So Fridays were usually the termination day, and it was like, well, I made this cut. Next Friday there's going to be another cut, and no one can focus on their job. No one can focus on what they're doing, and that's why in turnarounds they always say, always cut deeper, faster than you think you should, right? Because people just want to know the all clear sign is on, right? We had to terminate 40 people. They're done. Now we're going to rebuild with what's left, and you can feel comfortable for whatever period of time. But I had to have so many meetings so often with so many groups because things are happening, and now it's not like you got rid of Phil. Who's going to do Phil's job? And then people who are good start leaving. Who can? right? So all you got is the people who can't do any better are just hanging on to a paycheck, right? And then that's why you need to cut deep. It's like an amputation.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to do it twice.
Mm.
And you want to get it so whatever's left is healthy enough to survive. And there is gratification to taking a sinking boat and creating a lifeboat that goes on and builds back again. And that's why turnaround people are a little special, because anybody is great on the way up. When things are shining and everything they're doing is blossoming and money's flying and people are happy. But when the sun goes down and things get dark, there's not that many people who know how to rebuild a business. They're builders, but gosh, I don't want to be firing people. I don't want to renegotiate leases. It's so humbling. I'm out there with a tin cup all the time, begging for the creditors to give me another month and the employees to take a 20% pay cut and cut benefits. And gosh, it's so horrible. You don't have a place where you stop the bleeding and have a healthy whatever going forward. And in today's world, change is happening so quickly. I tell everybody, no matter where you work and whoever sends your paycheck, you're in business for yourself, right? There isn't 30-year and gold watch situation. There isn't mind your P's and Q's and everything will work out for you.
Yeah.
But I think that goes for relationships. Everything's moving faster. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and she was mentioning that they ask men today, when's the last time you ever went up to a lady and asked for a date? And 90% of them says, I've never done that. Everything has been online or through an app where, growing up, you had to go somewhere to meet somebody, maybe a bowling alley.
Go to the dad to even ask permission to ask her out. It's even more of a process.
It was more fun because it was more challenge, right?
Because it was about the relationship with.
And here's the other element. It was all local, right? So if you were in high school, you were basically just working in that high school universe. Sometimes you never even went to the next high school. Now, hey, you get online and it's like everybody from everywhere. And, it takes that enjoyment. And I think even in workplaces, when people had a chance to be and work and know each other, those were always the best places. But when people get shuffled in, shuffled out, or hey, it was great when Jim was here, but since Dave took over, he brought people in, he's doing all this crazy stuff. And I know it's bad for the company, but I'm going to pay for it now until the company figures out. So there's so much to everything. And that's what I would say. Having a support team, having a collaboration group, a place where you say, hey, here's what just happened. Let me throw it on the table. Anybody ever been through this? Anybody got an idea how the best way to transverse this is? Anything that someone says, like, hey, I got an idea now. Or I didn't think of that. Now I got something to go back to work with. And so it's really not saying take my issues and solve them. Just give me your fresh eyes and ears to them, And just like we're spontaneously responding to comments here, you can spontaneously respond to help there, right? Because this is where you get mindset and information and knowledge. The next part is, hey, how do I apply this? So before we finish up, let me catch up with this. We're not the same before COVID, so a shift. Nothing is the same, and nothing will ever be the same. And with AI, it's going to only accelerate.
Yeah.
But here's the trick or the benefit. You do what everybody isn't doing that bothers you, and you'll be one of the few things that attracts those people like you, right? If you become a benevolent company, if you become a communicating company, if you become a thoughtful company, it's rare that some people will just love the environment. You won't have to overpay them. You won't have to go out and steal somebody, right? Because the person you steal is going to get stolen from you.
Mhm.
They figured that out, that they can jump from one vine to another and eventually get to a higher place. Here we go with a person, Monica. Haven't seen you, but welcome. Sometimes a leader may have to look at themselves, not always the people who work for them. Sometimes leaders may need to look at why, and a large number of people either quit or have to be let go. That's a great point, because I have pretty much family business. My son, my daughter, my son-in-law. And they told me everything I needed to know about me and what people were thinking about me. So I always, if anything, it was like, it's not that bad. It's, Susie, don't listen to them, because it was funny. I know we're out of time, but when she first came in, she was so considerate and thoughtful to everybody. We need to pay them more money. We're not giving enough benefits, and we're not doing this. And then after a while, she got taken advantage like 4 or 5 times, and she was the harshest. I mean, when she walked in and said, "Come in, I need to talk to you," it was even me. It was the only person that scared me when she'd come into my office, because most of the time she was so right. But, until she had the experience and understanding of why you do certain things.
Yes.
And sometimes the people who are engaging you are taking advantage of you because of your influence with someone else, and all of a sudden it gets to be a little opaque. So, okay. And then Debbie comes back with, begin with the end in mind, looking at how we can relate from, and then back to begin with them, looking at how we can relate from the beginning. And if you have your own plan, it's responsibility to start building some side hustles, to start building networking. Like I say, being known before you're needed applies to job situations, relationship situations. Is have people, start networking, go get involved in groups, because those are the people that'll help you the most when you need the most, but they're not going to help you if you just met them, right? And so why not invest in those people, in those groups, because it's insurance. And not only that, what you'll find is you may be the person that makes a difference for someone else.
Mhm.
Not just where can I go to benefit, but where can I go to mutually benefit? Where, if you're going from an unfair, unjust situation, you don't want to move into another unfair, unjust community, right? You want people who want to see you free, who want to make you as independent and self-sufficient as possible, not, come in for another dose, and we'll keep you going for another week until that. So anyways, life is so wonderful because of all of these little nuances, issues. But let's be honest, we're talking about serious, mature situations with people that don't always bounce back.
Mhm.
Some people go down and don't come up, and some people just go away. And so that's how serious it is. But also, there's people who, like Kelly said, will come up to you and say, at the time, it was the worst thing ever happened. Looking back, it was the best thing ever happened. Because, in conclusion, and I'll let both of you ladies finish, is it's really, when you leave something, you leave everything you just had, and you're still not anywhere towards what you could have or where you're going to be, right? So that's the moment where you have minus and no plus. But as you start doing things on your own and growing, all of a sudden the opportunity, the future, everything starts opening up for you. So it's that lag time, let's say. And that's where you need family or friends to say, for the next 2 weeks, hey, just breathe, eat, take care of yourself. Don't worry about it. And just knowing someone does care about you. Because I think the isolation, the loneliness is the things that people just can't take. And to be honest, I know in my company, I'd say in the cases, that's the best part of everybody's day. And going home where they came from, or leaving where they came from, was one of the worst places. When they lose that family. And I honestly, you can't help it. There were people I wouldn't let go, and I didn't care what people said.
Mhm.
There were people with me 30 years that gave so much and contributed so much. So I was never that person, what'd you do for me lately? I said, this company wouldn't be here without Mary, and we're doing the best we can, and she's doing the best she can. And then it became a responsibility on other people. Why aren't you more tolerant, right? Why don't you appreciate her story? Because one day that'll be your story somewhere, right? So, anyways, to finish up, Elizabeth, final words. We did go over, but couldn't help it.
We didn't really touch on all the comments too.
Okay. This in so many ways. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just feel that, relating, be relatable. Again, just really focus more on connecting with that person, connecting with that group, connecting with the people around you, and just be relatable to others, and just bring them in, allow them to want to lead into you. And yeah, that's my take on relate.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. It was great having you again. Great insights. It sure moved me and Kelly and the audience. So, Kelly, what's your last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback on that, because I think that's a beautiful, way to end, is be relatable. And I think to be relatable is to be curious about others. When you feel like you can't relate, be curious, ask questions, and connect. I mean, and as I always end, because we are over today, and it always goes by so dang fast though, is everyone just go out and shine so bright that others can't help but shine too.
Terrific. Just want to share that Todd DeWitt is going to be with us tomorrow, brand new person. Just an amazing individual who I believe has 40 courses out there that people are buying every day. He's got about 91,000 connections. Just a professional at what he does. Great story. So hopefully we can dial that in. And with that, go out and have a beautiful day, and we'll talk again.